Welcome to the EchoCast. I am Bon, and this is a podcast about video game news, speculation, reviews, and whatever else I feel like talking about. This week, we'll be chatting about the Hogwarts Legacy release and drama, Nintendo's impressive show, Xbox continuing to hit roadblocks, and much more. A few things before we get started. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform, and if you're on Spotify or iTunes, please review. On YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment down below with your thoughts, questions, or to just say hello. A huge thank you to supporter level patrons PK, The Dawn, Cage Nephilim, our newest member, NeuroNix, and a special thanks to producer level patron, Hassan. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and getting ad-free episodes for as little as $1 per month, please check out patreon.com/BonDiesel. Gaming news. This week we have 9 stories. Story number 1, Hogwarts Legacy release and reception. Hogwarts Legacy has released and it has a Metacritic score of 89 and an OpenCritic score of 85. I checked out a bunch of the reviews of this, and it is one of those weird games. We'll talk about the drama and controversy in a moment, but it is one of those weird games where you read all of the reviews or you watch the reviews or whatever, and it's getting like 8s and 9s and like really good reviews. But when you read the reviews, they don't seem that good. And we've had this happen a few times, and it happens every now and then. Now, maybe that comes down to my own bias. Maybe that comes down to we do have a tendency that when we like something, you see it a lot with game reviews, that you focus on the things you didn't like, and you maybe don't focus as much on the things that you did. So sometimes it can come off like, say you like a game so much, you give it a 9 out of 10. You liked 85% of the features from the game, but that 15% is what stands out the most because you didn't like it, so you talk about it more. So maybe that's what's going on here. There is also the subject of there is some weird vibes around this game. For all intents and purposes, it seems like it's a decent game. It seems like it's good. But the drama around it is weird, and you're seeing this impact the scoring in 2 different ways, but really the same way at the end of the day. There's a hubbub right now. I'm recording this on Friday. One of the reviewers gave it a 1 out of 10, citing its issues with the whole story is based on some tropes that are pretty messed up. J.K. Rowling is kind of a piece of crap, and this does connect to her, as well as some other issues. And so, like, one reviewer gave it a 1 out of 10 because they just think the game is irredeemable because of that. Now, I've seen a lot of people kind of harping on that, like, oh, this is why they didn't send out review codes to everyone, which they didn't. They knew that some people would give it a bad score not on the merits of the game. But then, like, if you say that, you also have to acknowledge that there's people who are going to give it a good score for the same reason, whether it's to push back on the people who are going to do that, whether it's because maybe you like some of the tropes or maybe you agree with some of the stuff. So it's like, it's been an interesting thing to kind of watch and pay attention to, because, you know, some of the loudest people talking about this stuff have really been focusing on the kind of pushing back against the people who are critical of the game for its non-game things, right? But you're not seeing much acknowledgement of, it's terrible that reviewer is giving this game a lower score because of things that have nothing to do with the game. But we're just going to casually ignore that there are people rewarding the game for the same reasons, right? And we'll talk more about that. From what I've seen, it seems like it's just a solid Harry Potter world game that a lot of people, and and I've seen a lot of people say basically this is the Harry Potter game I always wanted. Like when I was a kid and those terrible license games were coming out when I was a kid, some of them were okay, but like for the most part, this game, this Hogwarts Legacy, is what everyone wanted, right? And the kind of what it's broken down with to me is it seems like there's basically 4 different groups involved with this game. Let's say 5. First is the group I'm really in, which I don't care. I'm not gonna play this. I don't care about it. I can't wait until I never hear about it again. I always thought Harry Potter was super lame and boring and dorky. I think some of the later movies are okay. I appreciate the movies where they're older a little more, but I just don't care. I never cared about Harry Potter. My grandma bought me the first book right when it came out. I read like 4 pages of it and never touched it again. I'm not like a high fantasy person, so it never really grabbed me. So I don't have those deep feels for it. So for someone like me, the extracurricular issues with it stand out a little more because I already don't care. So that's group 1. Group 2, and I think that represents a fairly small number of people. Group 2 and 3, I think, represent 95% of the players. It's either, or people, not players. It's either people who just want to play a good game. They like the universe, they like the game, and they just want to play it. They know it's a little problematic, and that's not great, but they kind of aren't super worried about that. They just want to play a good game. And that's a stance I can understand and appreciate. Things have been so hyper political one way or the other that not everyone wants to let that control every moment of their lives. I'm not saying that's the best way to handle it or whatever. I'm just saying I get that take. On the other hand, there's the people who, out of principle, are not going to play this, don't want to have anything to do with it, even if it is a good game, because they just think that it has some bad vibes, the money's going to a bad person. There are some weird things in the history of the series and what the series is kind of based on, and they just don't want to mess with it. They're not really rocking the boat. They're just saying, this might be a game I would have picked up years ago, but now I'm kind of good. I think that represents like the vast majority of people. And then you have the last 2 groups. You have, the 4th group of people who are like really actively like going after people who are playing the game, especially streamers and content creators who are very actively pushing back, who are posting spoilers for the game, who are trying to do petitions and things like that. And I think the problem with that is that most of what they're doing, it's not really reaching that those 2 big groups 2 and 3, and it's kind of just egging on the 5th group, which I'll talk about in a moment. And so I give this group that's been like a bit much credit because I think their heart's in the right place. I just don't think they're really accomplishing anything, but I still appreciate people trying to speak their truth, even if it's not being received real well, and maybe even if it's having some consequences that aren't ideal. And so I don't really agree with how those people are handling things, as few of them as there are, though they're very loud. But I definitely prefer them over the 5th group. And the 5th group are a group of people that seem to be like, I don't even think they like this game or care about it. I don't think maybe they are fans or not of the series, but there's definitely a group, and it's a lot of content creators who are very, very much like playing martyr and taking advantage of the whole situation, of all the drama, of all the attention that's happening, whether they're doing it for clicks or to bait out people who are upset, or to bait out people who are really into some of the conversations that are going on. There's this kind of gross group of people, and it's a really small number of people overall, but they're very loud, and many of them have big voices. And it's journalists, and it's streamers, and it's content creators, and it's some just normal people who are really trying to like push a lot of this, like, kind of owning the libs, or like really trying to like ham it up and be like, oh, everyone's hating me for playing this game, but I'm gonna keep doing it because I don't care about the blah blah blah. And like these people are the worst in my opinion, because group 4 is being kind of obnoxious and annoying, but at least their heart is like kind of in the right place, seemingly. But group 5, their heart is in the bad place. They're trying to stir up trouble. They're trying to get people upset. They're trying to profit, many of them. It can't be a coincidence that a few of these tweets I've seen pop up, like the one streamer posted her character and the name was like, I'm a bigot, like Ema bigot. And then you click on her Twitter profile and she's a streamer, and she just has a pretty obvious and proud far right, like very conservative, like borderline like extremist take on almost everything if you look through her profile. And it seems like that's kind of who populates group 5, right? And it's such a small number of people, and I don't think it should paint a stain on the people who are just enjoying the game, who don't want to get into all of the stuff. I understand that. It's been a weird week for me because I think that the majority of people will fall into that groups 2 and 3 who are just trying to enjoy it, or who just don't want to be a part of it, and that's as far as it goes for them. But you can't help but it's hard to ignore group 5, who I think is doing the most damage. The game is probably going to be one of the best selling games of the year. This game very well may be in the game of the year conversation. With the games that are slated to come out this year, it probably shouldn't even be in the top 5, because again, I think it's being like overrated and underrated for issues that have nothing to do with the game. So it probably falls somewhere in the middle, right? This is probably more of like a 7 out of 10 game. But regardless, it's just a weird, it's been like the vibes on Twitter have been weird this week beyond all the other crap that's going on. It's interesting, and you can tell people kind of feel like they're walking on eggshells. And that's kind of a bummer, because that's the fault of like a pretty small number of people who are involved in this situation, and especially addressing that group 5 that I'm talking about. They don't represent that many people, and I really don't think they are really that into the game. Like, I really don't think they care that much about the game. You're just seeing a lot of people, like Tom Henderson's one of them, and a few other journalists who like are always taking like the devil's advocate side of things, and who like definitely play to a certain type of person with the way that they handle themselves and word things, and talk about stuff. And it's interesting. And that's their right to do those things. It's just, I think the biggest thing that I'll kind of end this on, the thing that annoys me the most about this group 5 that I'm talking about, is that these, for the most part, are the same type of people you would see complaining about other people virtue signaling and sensationalizing thing and being oversensitive and acting like martyrs and things like that. So then it becomes kind of ironic or kind of annoying when you see them do the exact same thing on a thing that they just happen to care about themselves, or that they see as an opportunity themselves. So at the end of the day, I think history will look back on this and see it as a time that brought up some interesting conversation, and that from like the outside was interesting to watch. I think this game will end up going down as like, that game kind of got more attention than it probably really needed. But good for it. I hope that those developers had contracts that give them bonuses for Metacritic score and for sales, because those devs, obviously, it seems like they did a pretty good job making this game. But I do hope that maybe some of the outside issues that caused a lot of issues here can be resolved or handled differently one day in the future, but we'll see. Okay, story number 2, Nintendo Direct does very well. So we had a Nintendo Direct this week. The rumors around it were kind of like, this will probably be a good one. I'm not even that big of a Nintendo fan, even though I have been hankering for a Switch for a while. I just can't pay for hardware that old at this point. I really have to wait for their next hardware, but that might be years away at this point. Every time that everyone thinks they're about to announce a new console, they don't, and they keep running on this stuff that's probably like a third as fast as my phone. But anyways, this direct came out and it had Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It had Metroid Prime Remastered, which has been talked about for a long time. It had Pikmin 4. It had Advance Wars, finally. That had originally been planned to come out last year, but it got delayed because of the Ukraine war, because of some weird kind of similarities. And then the return of Samba de Amigo. And there were a few other things announced too, like DLC and expansion packs and stuff like that. But if you ask me, if you had the equivalent of that announcement for Xbox or PlayStation, I mean, you'd be talking about like getting like, if it was like Xbox, it'd be like more Halo information, Gears of War, more Forza information, Hellblade 2. Like, this was a big announcement for Nintendo. And even as someone who doesn't have a Switch and hasn't actually owned I don't think I've owned a Nintendo piece of hardware since my Game Boy Color. I don't even think I ever had an Advance, I remember correctly. So it was still fun to watch and be a part of and listen to coverage on. It definitely kind of, I know for me, kind of sways me toward being more excited to get a Nintendo console eventually. But like I said before, I just can't stomach paying for a Switch at this point. That hardware is just so dated, but then it's also kind of impossible to really predict. Like, man, I don't know when a new piece of hardware is going to come out. It could be 2 or 3 years away still. I would think it isn't, but they keep making money, and they are obviously not super worried about competing from a hardware strength or capability standpoint with Xbox and PlayStation. They gave up that ghost many years ago. I would say the GameCube was the last time they really tried to compete. And so we'll see, but the show was really good. If you had a favorite thing in the show, or if one of the things I talked about really stood out to you, let me know in the comments of the YouTube video or over on Twitter what you thought, or you can jump into the Discord for the podcast. Number 3 story here, we have Xbox's acquisition of Activision Blizzard hits even more speed bumps. So the CSA, who is the I believe the agency in the United Kingdom or Britain that is reviewing this case, it's one of like 5 or 6 that are still in progress, and it kind of seems like the other ones are waiting to see what happens with this case before they do their thing. For what it's worth, the Brazilian board has already approved the deal, which is kind of interesting. That Brazil is very friendly to Xbox for some reason. It's very interesting. But the big thing that happened here was the CSA finally laid down terms for what they would want to see before they would approve this deal. And it was a lot what they were asking for. So basically the CSA is saying that this deal needs to exclude Blizzard entirely, or cut out Call of Duty in order to be approved. So the thing is that that's not going to happen, because if you cut out either one of those things, the price being paid is already kind of inflated probably, but would be especially wild and completely out of, I mean, that if either one of those conditions are met, the deal is just going to get canceled. They just won't go through with it. Now, there are some notes that were interesting, and they did point out in the document that this was contained in that they haven't, this document wasn't taking into account any offers that have already been made. So Xbox offering to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation for 10 years at least was not taken into account here. But I have seen a lot of discussion and analysis that the CSA specifically doesn't really care that much about behavioral remedies, which I guess the 10-year deal would be a behavioral remedy, not a like actual like concrete remedy. And so it seems like people really believe the CSA is going to want some meat, is going to want something cut out of this deal, and that 10-year guarantee just may not be enough. Now, maybe Microsoft can offer the Sony Call of Duty at a negotiated price in perpetuity, maybe forever. Maybe they can try to pull something like that, or say 30 years or 50 years. The thing is that even the 10-year deal is interesting because we just don't know where gaming is going to be at in 10 years. The chances that gaming in 10 years will be similar to today are pretty good. But if they try to push out a deal to 20, 30, 40, 50 years, then you get into some really weird territory where games, you can't even predict where they're going to be in 50 years. Maybe it will be similar to what we have now, but it probably won't be. We also kind of can't even guess. So this whole deal has been interesting. There was a story that popped up after I even made this script talking about how Sony is actually throwing up some red flags right now and saying that they feel like some subpoenas by Microsoft that would essentially require Sony to divulge all of their plans for the next couple of years, and this would be in the public record. That Microsoft is bullying Sony. That's Sony's claim. It's just interesting because Sony's been so involved in this process and trying to do what they can to make this deal not go through. And it's interesting that now that they may get dragged into it in a way that they don't want, they're kind of, trying to push back, because what Microsoft is trying to do is trying to show, well, here's Sony's plans for the next so many years. They're kind of trying to paint themselves as like, if this deal happens, we're doomed. Where even if the deal happens, Sony will still be where they are, Nintendo will still be where they are, and Xbox isn't expected to increase its market share enough to even take the second or number one spot in the gaming world. And so Sony's really been doing a good job, depending on how you look at it, of trying to be like, look, like we're doomed if this deal goes through. And Microsoft has been trying to point out that, like, not only are they not doomed, they're probably still going to dominate the market for a long time, even if this deal goes through. You can't blame Sony for wanting to keep their position of authority and of influence, because they're a business that needs to make money. Like, it's obvious. But you also can't blame Microsoft for wanting to try to chip away at that and to have some more initiative and to have some more influence and leverage in the greater industry. Because right now they, with all their billions and trillions of dollars and all of their tech and all the stuff, they're still struggling and still falling behind, right? So it's just, I know people are probably sick of this whole situation at this point. I get it. I don't blame people for the most part, but it is important. At the end of the day, this is I think the biggest potential acquisition of companies ever. At $69 billion, at least in the electronics industry, in the gaming world, things like that. And so there is a precedent that's going to be set by whatever ends up happening here. I've seen a lot of doom and gloom, people thinking that the deal is doomed now. I don't think it is. I think it's definitely going to go through. I think there will probably be concessions. I think there may be another surprise or two left. But at this point, if it doesn't go through, Microsoft still owes Activision $2 billion. And here fairly soon, a new timeline starts where they would actually owe $3 billion to Activision if the deal falls through. Now, maybe that is worth the cost. It's better than dragging this out even further and having to pay more later. But I think Microsoft is pretty motivated to get this to happen, and that they may make drastic, but maybe not as drastic as CSA wants, changes to make it happen. But we'll have to wait and see. I will obviously keep talking about it. Story number 4, Jedi Survivor had a 9-minute gameplay reveal on IGN. So this is the game being made by Respawn. That's who made the Titanfall games, Apex, and made the previous Jedi Fallen Order game, I believe. And this footage looks great. It looks really good. It just basically shows off a bunch of combat, a little bit of cinematic stuff, a little bit of the exploration. It was definitely trying to show you that it's a bigger world that you'll be exploring. The combat and stuff looks pretty similar to what we played in the last game, but not in a bad way. It's I struggled with the last game. I really liked it, and I liked the characters and the graphics and all that were great. I was really bad at the combat. I am not a very good like parry system player where you have like timing and combos and stuff like that. It's why I'm a shooter fan. But I wanted to enjoy it, and I did what I played, but I never finished it. This one, they've already talked about things with like checkpoints and saves and stuff like that being different. It seems like I think they're gonna have even like fast travel and stuff. It seems like they are going to at least give options for it to be more casual, which I'm definitely interested in. And I'm excited for this. I think it's a really cool story. There's a lot of potential for Cal Kestis, the main character, to show up in some of the actual Star Wars like live action movies and shows. And so I'm definitely curious to see that potentially happen. I thought this was a great showing. I think people should only be more excited. This game did get delayed from March to April. I don't think that's that big of a deal. It actually comes out on April 28th now, I believe, which is a couple days after my birthday. So maybe that will be my little gift to myself. I mean, if you like the first game, it seems like this one's going to be good. Even if you didn't like it for particular reasons, like I kind of didn't, it seems like they're trying to do stuff to make that better, and that it might be worth coming back to now. Okay, well, before story number 5, please enjoy this ad. And if you don't want ads, you can join over at Patreon at patreon.com/BonDiesel. Okay, well, there's your ad. Again, if you don't want to hear those, go over to Patreon. You can join up there. You can also probably go to YouTube and watch on that. And that platform, depending on what your ad deal is with them, you might be able to watch it without ads there as well. On the story number 5, I had previously just mentioned Apex, and we have a new Apex Legends season being detailed, as well as the 4th anniversary of the game. That's crazy that they're talking about it being 4 years. I refuse to believe that, but it sounds about right. I remember when they announced it, it was a shadow drop game. I remember that it being, okay, here's this BR we're doing, and it's available right now. Go download it, go play it. And I did, and it's been my favorite BR ever since. I have never really gotten into Warzone. I actually didn't really like PUBG that much. I thought it kind of sucked. This Apex, it's the movement, it's the pacing, it's the gunplay, especially. It feels so good to play. Apex is it's the best. It's the best in my opinion. You can fight me over it, that's fine. Obviously it's subjective, but it's just so good. Their updates are always so fun, and they really do a good job of kind of straddling the line between goofy and serious and fun and stuff like that. It's just so good, and I'm so glad the game has been so successful for multiple years now. And this next season is really interesting because they're adding a deathmatch mode, but they're not adding a new legend. And I think this is the first time they haven't added a legend with a new season in like a really long time, maybe ever. I would have to look into it. But there is a new gun. I believe there's a bunch of other mechanical changes to the game and things like that. They always have a bunch of style. They always have a battle pass with a bunch of really cool unlocks and outfits and cosmetics and stuff like that. So I'll definitely be jumping back in next week when this drops. I believe it's on the 14th of February. And yeah, I'm definitely interested to play that, to check it out. I really like Apex. And even though I actually wasn't that big of a fan of this Apex single player game they were going to do, this Titanfall Legends, it is interesting to note that this deathmatch mode that's being introduced was supposed to be a way they were going to introduce the single player and try to connect the battle royale to the single player game. It was going to be like all in one launcher. But it seems like we've lost the single player game, but the deathmatch is still coming, and I think that this will be great to have like a deathmatch mode. I believe they're also getting rid of the previous mode that they had released, the arenas. That was where it was like single death stuff with multiple rounds, so kind of like Rainbow Six Siege or Counter-Strike, things like that. It was okay. I played it for a couple weeks, but it never really caught me. I think deathmatch will at least for me be a thing where I'll do a couple rounds of deathmatch and then jump into the BR. So it can at least be like a good warm-up, and so I'm excited about that. If you plan on playing it, let me know. I don't know, who's your favorite legend? Tell me who your favorite legend is. Story number 6, the Division 2 Season 11 has been delayed again. They put out a letter to the community yesterday on Twitter talking about how they're basically the system they used to make the final builds of the game had broken due to some other issues, and they needed to fix that. I will say that as of today, this is Friday, they did release a patch this morning, which should indicate that their build system has been fixed. But they still need to fix the issue that initially caused the delay in Season 11 coming out. I suspect this will happen by the end of the month for sure, but they are going to do kind of like an update stream before that, and they haven't announced that yet. My guess is next week they will tell us that that stream is coming the following week, and that Season 11 will drop shortly after that. I can't really pretend I'm super excited for this at this point. I'm not really aware that this season's going to bring a bunch of new stuff other than kind of the typical things they do, new weapons, new gear sets, new whatever. It will wrap up the story of year 4, but I'll be honest, the last season I thought ended really flat, and I wasn't the story didn't really like pique my interest that much. I'm obviously curious to how they're going to wrap it up here, but I'm really curious about year 5, because when I did my interview with Yannick, who's the head of the team making the Division 2 right now, making this content, even then he made it kind of obvious that there's a lot of tech debt in the Division 2. The Division 2 wasn't meant to still be going. And so when they were finishing the game, when they were making the game, you run into an issue and you can fix the issue thoroughly, but it's going to take a week of development time. Or you can patch it up, you can get it done today, and you'll just come back later to fix it, but you never actually will, because that's how these things work. And if the game was only gonna go for 2 years like was originally planned, that would be fine. The long-term fix actually would have been a waste of your time. This patch will do, because you're not gonna add that much stuff. It's gonna hold up with the content that's planned, and you'll be fine. So then what has happened with the Division 2 is that they went beyond those 2 years of content, and now they went to a year 4. Year 3 actually didn't have any content. But this year 4 added a lot of stuff, and all of these systems are breaking down because that patch can't hold up anymore. So now that big week-long fix that they needed to do 4 or 5 years ago, it was only going to take a week because they had a full complement. They had a full giant development team on it. Well, now it could take months. And in theory, this is all hypothetical. And even the patch fix would have taken multiple weeks with the current team, which is much smaller. It's a small ongoing team, not a big giant production team. And so what we're seeing is that things are breaking down in the game, and they just aren't, it's just not working. As they add more and more content, it's just not working. And I'm really curious about year 5, because even in year 4, it felt like with every update they put out, there was some catastrophic issue, some catastrophic bug or something like that. And I just find it really hard to believe that they're just going to magically fix that with year 5. Maybe they will. Maybe the things that they're fixing right now are going to make this better in the future. I'm pretty willing to bet they aren't. So I don't think it's impossible that they will cancel year 5 and just move on and reallocate resources and stuff like that. I think a Division 3 comes one day, but not until after Star Wars releases, which that's probably still a year or 2 away. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to really call for like no more Division content. Like, I mean, it's cool if they make more, I guess, but I don't know if the current content they're putting out, these seasons and this yearly content, is like, it really justifies the time being put into it, the resources being put into it. I mean, if they're doing it, there must be a big enough audience to justify it. There must be enough people buying the battle pass and things like that. But I just, if every month they spend on Division 2 puts out, the Division 3 another month or 6 months or whatever, I would rather them just kind of let it go and move on, because I think Division 2 is kind of worn out its welcome to a point. There's obviously people who disagree with me and people who are much more active in the community still. But I just, this is one of those things, like, are you going to cater to the 5% or are you going to try to reach the 95%? And I just wonder how long they can cater to that smaller number of people and to keep things solvent. Apparently they are, but it just, at some point, the work feels like it just isn't going to be efficient. And with all the issues that keep cropping up, that has to be coming sooner than later. That's just my opinion. Story number 7, the PS VR2 hardware is in reviewers' hands. So if you are on Twitter and you pay attention to that stuff, you will probably have seen that a bunch of content creators and journalists posted their brag tweets this week getting their PSVR2 hardware. This is going to be an interesting one because it's already been announced that Sony is cutting back production on these because the pre-orders on them was like borderline like bad. And that can't be that surprising. PlayStation 5s are easier to get now, but they're still $500. And this PSVR2 headset is $550. So if you want to get it, you have to pay over $1,000 at least. Then the games are a big issue. There's a Horizon Zero Dawn VR game coming, which will probably be okay. But other than that, all of the other games that are coming out are just ports of existing games. Some of them have been out for a really long time. It's not thought that the PSVR 2 is going to work with other VR stores. So you're going to be kind of relegated to whatever Sony can make licensing deals for or create themselves. And that may not be enough. I think the way the reviews on this are going to play out is that people are going to say that it's got some really innovative tech, that it's solid hardware that Sony tends to make, but it just doesn't have the games to justify it over a competing system, even if the competing system is more or less expensive. See, that's where you have to really, it's going to depend on who you are, how you calculate the cost. Does this, should you compare it to $1,000 VR headsets? Because you do need the PlayStation and the headset. It's, just the headset is only $550, but you can't do anything with just the headset. And so if you compare it to other VR headsets that are $1,000 ish, is this really the better deal when it comes to the library and performance and things like that? So I think it'll be interesting. I think Sony fans will be into it because they lap up everything that Sony puts out justifiably. I just suspect that this isn't going to be a big like pull people to Sony product. It's going to be more of a satisfy current customers product. And when you're the best selling console, that's not a bad position to be in. It just may not be the big like market leader that they were probably originally hoping it could be. Story number 8, the day before devs. This is just the story that just keeps on giving. They responded to critics by basically saying that, everything is real, don't listen to haters and blah, blah, blah. The reason I include this story is that if you go to their Twitter and you look up this tweet they put out where they were like calling people out for calling them out, one of the most liked replies to this tweet is a compilation video that someone made showing that almost every single second of every trailer they've done, they've lifted from another trailer from another game, whether it was The Last of Us, The Division, a bunch of different games that I would say a majority of their cinematics and the way that they've advertised this game have been imagery straight up just stolen from other games, but with their assets. Maybe that means nothing, but man, that's a very, very solid tactic of people who are being highly shady with how they're handling things. And so this is just kind of the gift that keeps on giving. I've been saying for a long time, I think this game will come out. I think it is a game, but I think it's going to come out and it's going to look a lot more like a bunch of the crappy, random Steam early access zombie survival games than this like really cool thing that they initially showed. And I think that has been kind of assumed for a while. I was really surprised when I saw people like really buy into this game, especially early. It was a lot of the Division creators, which, I'll leave my personal commentary out of. but I don't know, man. It's kind of the gift that keeps on giving, but I would kind of rather just, pull the arrow out, just let it bleed and just get this thing over with so we can finally see that this was basically nothing. Maybe I'm wrong. And then finally, the number 9 story is just talking about some Mass Effect. I did put out a new video this week. When Mass Effect 3 came out, Jeff Keighley did it's like an app, or it's like a multimedia presentation called The Final Hours. And it's really cool. And so I kind of breezed through it. There's parts of it that I want to go back to and do a video about. Specifically, there's a handwritten document talking about the Shepard Survives ending. And I'm really curious to check that out. And I will... I'll get back to that eventually. The next video I'm going to make is going to be talking about the argument for bringing back the Paragon and Renegade system. If you've been on any of my streams, you've probably heard me talk about my idea for that. So I want to put that into video form and put it out there and see what other people think. So be on the lookout for that, probably next Wednesday. And that's kind of what I have for all the news. For listener questions, I recorded this really early this week, so we didn't get any in quite yet. But if you have questions or stories or topics you want me to cover, you can ask me on Twitter at Bondiesel or at the EchoCast. You can ask in the Discord. The link should be in the description, or you can ask in the comments of the YouTube video. And that's what we have this week. So thank you so much for listening. I am happy to get any feedback that you have on the show. You can leave it in all of the places I just talked about. You can find me all over the internet as Bondiesel on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, or over on Twitch. And that's all I have. So until next time. Thank you.